Danny Carter wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at the engine diagnostics one more time. The numbers looked good. He smiled to himself, feeling satisfied with another job well done. Working as an engineer on the mining station wasn't glamorous, but Danny liked it. The pay was decent, the people were friendly, and he got to see the stars every day through the observation windows. He was 28 years old, average height, with brown hair that always seemed messy no matter what he did with it. His sister Amy always teased him about it during their video calls. She said he looked like he just rolled out of bed. Danny didn't mind. Out here in deep space, nobody cared much about appearances. The mining station orbited a small asteroid cluster near the edge of human territory. It was far from Earth, far from Mars, far from anywhere really, but it was home for now. Danny had been working here for 3 years, fixing machines, keeping systems running, and occasionally joining supply runs to the nearby trading post. Today was one of those supply run days. Captain Pete Johnson needed someone to help load cargo, and Danny had volunteered. It would be a nice break from the usual routine. The trading post was neutral ground where humans, aliens, and various species all came to do business. Danny had been there dozens of times before. It was always interesting to see the different aliens, hear their strange languages, and watch them haggle over prices. The transport ship was small, but reliable. Pete was a good pilot, older than Danny by maybe 15 years, with gray in his beard and laugh lines around his eyes. They launched from the station and made the 2-hour journey to the trading post without any problems. The trip was smooth and quiet, just the hum of the engines and the endless darkness of space outside. When they docked at the trading post, Danny felt the familiar excitement of seeing something different. The post was a massive structure, cobbled together from old ships and station parts. It looked like a mess from the outside, but inside it was organized chaos. Hundreds of beings moved through the corridors, buying, selling, and trading everything imaginable. Danny and Pete headed to the cargo section to pick up their supplies. They needed food, replacement parts, and medical supplies for the mining station. The human trader, a woman named Kate, had everything ready for them. She was efficient and professional, checking items off her list as they loaded the cargo containers. Everything was going smoothly until the Crithians showed up. Danny had seen Crithians before. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with dark gray skin that looked like rough stone. Their eyes were solid black, no whites at all, and they had no hair anywhere on their bodies. They wore armor that looked both ceremonial and functional, covered in spikes and sharp edges. Most species gave Crithians a wide berth. They had a reputation as pirates and raiders, always looking for trouble. A group of 5 Crithians approached the human trading area. Their leader was massive, even bigger than the others, with scars across his face and arms. He looked at the supplies Danny and Pete were loading with obvious interest. "Humans," the leader said in rough but understandable English. "You have medical supplies." Kate stepped forward. "These supplies are already purchased and accounted for. If you need medical supplies, I can help you place an order." The Crithian leader laughed, a harsh sound that made Danny's skin crawl. "We don't place orders. We take what we need." Pete moved closer to Danny. "Easy," he whispered. "Don't make any sudden moves," but Kate wasn't backing down. "This is neutral ground. The trading post has rules. You can't just take things." The Crithian leader's expression darkened. "Rules are for the weak. Humans are weak. You barely have any ships. You barely have any territory. You are nothing in this galaxy." Danny felt anger rising in his chest. He knew he should stay quiet, but the words came out before he could stop them. "We're not weak, and we're not afraid of bullies." The moment the words left his mouth, Danny knew he'd made a mistake. The Crithian leader's black eyes locked onto him. A cruel smile spread across the alien's face. "Brave words from a soft creature," the Crithian said. "Let's see how brave you really are." Everything happened fast after that. The Crithians moved with surprising speed. 2 of them grabbed Danny before he could react. He struggled, but they were incredibly strong. Pete shouted and tried to help, but another Crithian knocked him down with a casual backhand. Kate triggered the station's alarm and security started responding, but the Crithians were already moving toward their ship. Danny fought as hard as he could. He kicked, punched, and tried to break free, but it was useless. The Crithians dragged him through the corridors like he weighed nothing. Other beings watched but didn't intervene. Nobody wanted to fight the Crithians. They reached the Crithian ship and threw Danny inside. The door slammed shut behind them. Danny scrambled to his feet looking for a way out, but there was none. The ship undocked from the trading post and accelerated away into space. The Krithian leader, whose name Danny would later learn was Vroktar, stood over him. "You will be our guest until your weak government pays us what we demand. If they refuse, you will die. Either way, you are ours now." Danny was shoved into a small cell, barely big enough to stand in. The door locked with a heavy clang. He sat on the cold metal floor, his heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. One moment he'd been loading cargo, and the next he was a prisoner on an alien ship. Hours passed. Danny had no idea where they were going or what would happen to him. He could hear the Krithians talking in their own language, harsh and guttural sounds that echoed through the ship. Eventually, someone brought him a small amount of water and what looked like food, though Danny couldn't identify it. He drank the water but left the food alone. Time moved strangely in the cell. Danny tried to stay calm, tried to think clearly. He knew Pete and Kate would report what happened. He knew his sister Amy would be worried sick. He wondered if anyone would come for him or if he'd just become another statistic, another human lost in the vastness of space. But deep down, in a place he couldn't quite explain, Danny felt certain of one thing. Humanity didn't abandon its own. They would come. He just had to survive long enough for them to find him. The message reached Earth Command exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes after Danny Carter was taken. Captain Pete Johnson had sent an emergency transmission the moment his head stopped spinning from the Krithians' blow. The message was simple and devastating. Civilian engineer Danny Carter, 28 years old, citizen of Earth, had been kidnapped by Krithian raiders at the neutral trading post. Admiral Paul Grant was in a meeting when his aide interrupted with the news. Paul was 53, a career military officer with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. He read the report once, then read it again. His jaw tightened. "Get me the council," he said quietly. Now. The United Earth Council convened within the hour. Representatives from every major nation and colony appeared on the massive screen in the council chamber. Some joined via hologram, others through video link. All of them looked grim as Paul presented the facts. "The Krithians have taken one of our citizens hostage," Paul said, his voice steady but cold. "They've sent demands. They want technology, resources, and ships. They want us to pay for the return of Danny Carter." One of the counselors, an older woman named Helen Brooks, spoke up. "What do we know about this young man?" "He's an engineer. No military training. He was on a routine supply run. Wrong place, wrong time." Paul pulled up Danny's file on the main screen. A photo showed a young man with messy brown hair and a friendly smile. He has a younger sister, Amy, who lives in Boston. His parents are deceased. He's worked on mining stations for 3 years. By all accounts, he's a good person who didn't deserve this. What are our options? Another counselor asked. Paul looked directly at the camera. We have 2 options. We pay the ransom and hope the Krithians honor their word, which history suggests they won't. Or we go get him. The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood what Paul was suggesting. Going after Danny meant war with the Krithians. It meant risking ships and lives for one person. Helen Brooks was the first to speak. Admiral Grant, I need to be clear about what you're proposing. You want to mobilize our military forces, potentially the entire fleet, to rescue one civilian engineer? Yes, Paul said without hesitation. That could cost billions. It could cost lives. It could destabilize our relationships with other species. It could, Paul agreed. But if we don't go after him, what message does that send? What does it say about us as a species? Do we tell our citizens that they're only valuable if it's convenient? That we'll abandon them if the cost is too high? Another counselor jumped in. The Krithians are testing us. They think we're weak because we're new to the galactic community. If we pay, every pirate and raider in the galaxy will see us as easy targets. The debate lasted 20 minutes. Arguments flew back and forth, voices raised and lowered. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. Earth would not negotiate with kidnappers. Earth would not abandon Danny Carter. They would send the fleet. Paul felt something shift in his chest when the vote was announced. Pride, maybe, or fear for what was coming. Possibly both. Mobilize everything, he ordered. I want every available ship ready to move in 48 hours. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across Earth, across Mars, across every human colony and outpost, the military machine came to life. Shipyards that had been quiet suddenly blazed with activity. Ships in dock for maintenance were rushed through repairs. Crews on leave were recalled. Reserves were activated. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes received her orders while she was having dinner with her parents in Denver. She was 32, a tactical officer with 10 years of service, and she'd never seen anything like what was being planned. Her orders directed her to report to the ECS Valiant, one of Earth's largest warships, within 12 hours. She kissed her parents goodbye, grabbed her pre-packed bag, and headed to the spaceport. On the shuttle ride up to orbit, she watched the news feeds. Danny's story was everywhere. His photo, his background, interviews with his sister Amy. The whole planet was talking about him. When Lisa boarded the Valiant, the ship was already humming with energy. Crew members rushed through corridors, checking systems, loading supplies, preparing for deployment. She found her station in the tactical center and immediately began reviewing fleet compositions. The numbers were staggering. More than 300 ships were being assembled. Carriers, destroyers, frigates, support vessels, medical ships, supply transports. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever put together. Lisa had studied military history, and she couldn't think of a single time when so much force had been mobilized for one person. On the Crithian ship, Danny had no idea what was happening back home. He sat in his cell, marking time by counting meals. They'd fed him 4 times so far, which meant at least 2 days had passed, maybe 3. The food was terrible, some kind of paste that tasted like metal, but he forced himself to eat it. He needed to keep his strength up. Vroktar visited him on the 3rd day. The Crithian leader stood outside the cell, looking down at Danny with amusement. "Your people are very quiet," Vroktar said. "We sent them our demands. They haven't responded. I think they don't care about you." Danny looked up at him. "They care, do they?" Vroktar laughed. "You are one person. Humans are logical creatures, yes? They will calculate the cost of rescuing you versus the cost of letting you die. The math is simple. You don't understand humans at all," Danny said. "I understand weakness. I understand fear. Your species has been in space for barely 100 years. You have small territory, few ships. You are nothing compared to the established powers." Danny wanted to argue, but he saved his energy. Let the alien think what he wanted. Danny knew the truth. He'd grown up learning about human history, about the times when humans had fought impossible battles for impossible reasons. Humans were stubborn. They were emotional. They didn't always do what was logical. Back on Earth, Danny's sister Amy was struggling. The media wanted interviews constantly. Government officials wanted to keep her informed. Support messages flooded in from around the world. She did one press conference, standing in front of cameras with tears in her eyes, begging for her brother's safe return. The video went viral within hours. Amy's pain was raw and real, and it touched something deep in the human collective consciousness. Protests erupted, not against the government, but in support of action. People gathered in city squares holding signs that read, "Bring Danny home and no one left behind." Admiral Paul Grant watched it all from his command center. The fleet was almost ready. Ships had gathered in orbit around Earth, a sight that took his breath away every time he looked at the displays. Hundreds of vessels, thousands of crew members, all preparing to cross vast distances of space for one engineer they'd never met. His second-in-command, a sharp woman named Karen West, stood beside him. "The fleet is ready, sir. All ships report green across the board. We can launch on your order." Paul took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would define his career and possibly humanity's place in the galaxy. "Send the order. All ships prepare for departure. We're bringing Danny Carter home." The Earth fleet jumped into Crithian space like a hammer falling from the sky. 317 ships, all moving in perfect coordination, all with one objective. Admiral Paul Grant stood on the bridge of the ECS Valiant, watching the tactical displays as his massive armada spread out across multiple sectors. The Crithians detected the human fleet immediately. Their response was confusion, then disbelief, then panic. Monitoring stations along the border sent urgent messages back to Crithian command. An entire human fleet had just invaded their territory. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a small military action. This was war. Vroktar received the news in his private quarters aboard his ship. He stared at the messenger, a younger Crithian warrior, as if the words made no sense. "Say that again," Vroktar demanded. "A human fleet, Commander. Hundreds of ships. They've crossed into our territory and they're attacking our outposts." Vroktar laughed, but it sounded forced even to his own ears. "Hundreds? That's impossible. The humans barely have a fleet at all. This must be a mistake. Commander, 3 of our stations have already been destroyed. The reports are confirmed. The humans are here and they're not negotiating. For the first time in many years, Vroktar felt something cold settle in his stomach. Fear. He'd miscalculated badly. The human fleet wasn't just coming for their hostage. They were coming with enough force to level Crethean territory. Admiral Paul Grant's strategy was simple and brutal. He divided his fleet into strike groups, each targeting a specific objective. He wasn't trying to conquer Crethean space. He was trying to break their will and find Danny Carter. Every Crethean outpost, every supply depot, every communication hub became a target. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes worked 16-hour shifts in the tactical center, coordinating fleet movements and analyzing enemy positions. She'd barely slept since the operation began, running on coffee and determination. The tactical screen showed constant updates as human ships engaged Crethean defenses. Strike Group 3 reporting success, an officer announced. The depot at Sigma 7 is destroyed. Strike Group 5 engaging enemy ships near the mining colony, another voice called out. Lisa marked the positions on her display and calculated the next moves. The Cretheans were scrambling to respond, but they'd never faced anything like this. Human ships fought with a ferocity that surprised everyone. Every captain, every crew member knew what they were fighting for. They were fighting for Danny Carter, one of their own, and that made them dangerous. On the 4th day of the offensive, Captain Ryan Mitchell led a boarding action on a Crethean supply station. Ryan was 35, a Marine captain with combat experience from a dozen conflicts. He led a team of 20 Marines, all wearing heavy combat armor and carrying the latest weapons. The Marines breached the station's hull with cutting charges. Alarms blared as they poured inside, weapons ready. The Crethean defenders fought back, but they were outmatched. Human Marines moved with tactical precision, clearing rooms and securing sections of the station. Ryan's team reached the command center after 20 minutes of fighting. The Crethean commander tried to destroy the computer systems, but Ryan shot the control panel before he could complete the action. The Marines secured the commander and accessed the station's database. "This is Mitchell to Valiant," Ryan reported. "Station is secure. We're pulling their data now." Lisa Hayes received the transmission and immediately sent a team to analyze the captured information. They needed to find Danny's location, and every piece of intelligence brought them closer. The data from the station revealed a network of Crethean bases and ship movements. Lisa's team worked through the night, cross-referencing locations and communications. Finally, one of her analysts, a young officer named Jake Cooper, found something promising. "Ma'am, I've got a coded transmission here. It references a high-value asset being moved to a secure location." Jake pulled up the details on the main screen. The location matches an asteroid base in the Crethean home sector. "It's heavily fortified." Lisa leaned forward, studying the information. "Could the high-value asset be our hostage?" "The timing matches. The transmission was sent 2 days after Danny Carter was taken." Lisa grabbed her communicator. "I need to speak with Admiral Grant immediately." When Paul heard the news, he didn't hesitate. "Send the coordinates to all fleet commanders. We're moving the entire Armada to that location." The Crethean leadership finally understood what was happening. The humans weren't coming to negotiate. They weren't coming to make demands. They were coming to take their citizen back by force, and they didn't care how many Crethean ships they had to destroy to do it. The Crethean Council sent urgent messages to other species, trying to rally support. They contacted the Viridian Empire, the Zoltan Confederacy, and dozens of other powers. The message was always the same. The humans were acting with unprecedented aggression over a single hostage. They needed to be stopped, but no one answered the call. The other species watched the conflict with intense interest, but none of them wanted to stand between humanity and their objective. The human response was terrifying in its intensity. One species fighting with such determination for a single individual was something new to the galaxy. Inside his cell, Danny heard explosions in the distance. He'd been imprisoned for what felt like weeks now, though he'd lost exact count of the days. The Cretheans had moved him several times, always to darker and more secure locations. Now he was in what they called the Fortress, an asteroid base that supposedly couldn't be breached. But something was happening. The guards were nervous. They spoke in hushed, urgent voices. Danny heard the word humans mentioned several times, and he felt his heart race with hope. Vroktar came to see him again. The Crethean leader looked different now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "Your people are insane," Vroktar said, his voice shaking with anger. "They've destroyed dozens of our stations. They've killed hundreds of our warriors. All of this for you? One insignificant human." Danny stood up, meeting Vroktar's black eyes. "I told you. You don't understand humans. We're willing to negotiate now," Vroktar continued. "We'll return you unharmed if they stop this attack." "They won't stop," Danny said with certainty. "Not until I'm safe. Not until you've learned that taking a human hostage has consequences." Vroktar slammed his fist against the cell bars. "This is madness. We took one person. Your people are treating this like a declaration of war." "It is a declaration of war," Danny replied. "You just didn't realize it until now." Admiral Paul Grant's fleet arrived at the asteroid fortress 12 days after Danny was taken. The base was exactly as described, heavily fortified and surrounded by defensive platforms and mines. A small Crithian fleet guarded the approach, ready to defend their stronghold. Paul studied the tactical display and made his decision. "All ships begin the assault. I want that base taken, and I want our citizen recovered. No holding back." The space around the asteroid erupted into fire and light. Human ships pushed forward, weapons blazing. The Crithian defenders fought desperately, but they were overwhelmed by sheer numbers and determination. One by one, the defensive platforms fell. The Crithian ships were destroyed or forced to retreat. Lisa Hayes coordinated the assault from her station, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Strike Group 7, concentrate fire on the northern shield generators. Strike Group 9, provide cover for the marine transports." The battle raged for 6 hours. When the fortress's shields finally collapsed, Admiral Grant gave the order that everyone had been waiting for. "Send in the Marines. Bring Danny Carter home." The Marine assault transports launched from the ECS Valiant, like angry hornets leaving a nest. Captain Ryan Mitchell sat in the lead transport with his team of 20 Marines, all veterans all ready for the fight ahead. The transport shook as it flew through the debris field around the asteroid fortress, dodging burning wreckage and incoming fire from the few remaining Crithian defense guns. Ryan checked his weapon one more time and looked at his team. "Listen up. Our mission is simple. Get inside, find Danny Carter, and bring him out alive. Everything else is secondary. Are we clear?" "Clear, sir," the Marines responded in unison. The transport slammed into the asteroid's outer hull with a heavy clang. Cutting charges ignited, burning through the thick metal in seconds. The moment the breach was complete, Ryan was through it, his rifle up and ready. The interior of the fortress was dark and full of smoke from the bombardment. Emergency lights flickered, casting everything in red and shadow. Ryan's helmet display switched to thermal vision, highlighting heat signatures throughout the corridor. Crithian defenders were already moving to intercept them. "Contact front," Ryan called out. His rifle barked 3 times and a Crithian warrior dropped. His team moved forward in a practiced formation, covering each other and clearing the corridor with professional efficiency. The Crithians fought hard, defending their fortress with desperation. They knew what the humans had come for, and they knew what it meant if they failed. Firefights erupted at every intersection. The sound of gunfire echoed through the metal corridors, mixing with shouts in multiple languages and the hiss of hydraulic doors. Ryan's team pushed deeper into the fortress, following the intelligence that Lisa Hayes fed them through their communication systems. "Command says the prisoner cells are 3 levels down, Section 7. We're heading the right way." A Crithian rushed around a corner, and Ryan's second-in-command, Sergeant Chris Daniels, took him down with a burst from his rifle. "They're getting more organized. They know we're here for someone specific." "Let them know," Ryan said grimly. "Won't change anything." Back on the Valiant, Lisa watched multiple tactical feeds at once. Ryan's team was making good progress, but 2 other Marine teams were pinned down by heavy resistance. She coordinated fire support from the ships outside, directing precise strikes that blasted holes in the fortress's structure and created new entry points for the Marines. Admiral Paul Grant stood behind her, watching everything unfold. He hadn't slept in 30 hours. His uniform was rumpled and his eyes were red with exhaustion, but he wouldn't leave the bridge until Danny Carter was safe. "How much longer?" he asked quietly. "Ryan's team is 2 minutes from the detention area," Lisa replied without taking her eyes off her screens. "We're close, sir." Inside the fortress, Vroktar made his final desperate decision. He grabbed 2 of his best warriors and rushed toward the detention cells. If the humans wanted their hostage, they would have to go through him first. Better yet, maybe he could use the human as a shield to escape this disaster. He reached Danny's cell and slammed his fist on the control panel. The door hissed open. Danny looked up, weak and thin from days of poor food and worse treatment, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "You're coming with me," Vroktar growled, grabbing Danny by the arm and hauling him out of the cell. Danny didn't resist. He knew struggling would be pointless against the massive Krithian strength. But he also knew that help was close. He could hear the sound of fighting getting louder, could hear human voices shouting commands. They were here. They'd actually come for him. Vroktar dragged Danny toward the command center, using him as a human shield. The two Krithian warriors followed, weapons ready. They made it halfway there before they ran into Ryan Mitchell's team. The two groups faced each other across a narrow corridor. Ryan's rifle was aimed directly at Vroktar, but the Krithian had Danny held in front of him, a blade pressed against the human's throat. "Stay back," Vroktar snarled. "Stay back or I kill him right now." Ryan's finger hovered over the trigger, his mind racing through options. His team had clear shots on the other two Krithians, but Vroktar was protected by Danny's body. One wrong move and their entire mission would end in failure. "Let him go," Ryan said calmly. "You've already lost. Your fortress is falling. Your fleet is destroyed. There's nowhere for you to run." "I can still kill him," Vroktar replied. "Is that what you want? To come all this way and watch him die?" Danny felt the blade pressing into his skin, felt a trickle of blood running down his neck, but he also felt something else. Anger. These Krithians had taken him, imprisoned him, threatened him, all because they thought humans were weak and wouldn't fight back. They'd been wrong about everything. "Do it," Danny said quietly. Vroktar looked confused. "What?" "Do it," Danny repeated louder this time. He looked at Ryan, making eye contact with the Marine captain. "Don't let him use me to escape. Finish this." Ryan saw the determination in Danny's eyes and understood. This civilian engineer, this ordinary man who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, was willing to die to make sure his rescuers completed their mission. It was the bravest thing Ryan had ever seen. But Ryan wasn't about to let that happen. He'd come too far, and too many people had fought too hard to bring Danny home. "Negative," Ryan said firmly. "We're all leaving here together." The standoff lasted 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. Then everything happened at once. An explosion rocked the fortress from another assault team's demolition charges. Vroktar stumbled slightly, his grip loosening for just a fraction of a second. Danny drove his elbow back into the Krithian's stomach with all his strength. It barely hurt the armored warrior, but it was enough to shift Vroktar's position by inches. Ryan didn't waste the opportunity. His rifle cracked once and the blade fell from Vroktar's hand. A second shot and the Krithian leader fell backward. The other two Krithians raised their weapons, but Ryan's team was faster. Sergeant Daniels and 2 other Marines fired simultaneously. Both Krithians went down hard. Ryan rushed forward and grabbed Danny, pulling him away from Vroktar's body. "Are you hurt? Can you walk?" Danny touched his neck where the blade had cut him. It was bleeding, but not badly. "I can walk. I'm okay." "Good, we're getting you out of here." Ryan handed Danny off to one of his Marines. "Get him to the transport." Everyone else were moving. The team fought their way back through the fortress, protecting Danny in the center of their formation. More Krithian defenders tried to stop them, but the Marines were unstoppable now. They had their objective, and nothing was going to prevent them from completing the mission. They reached the breach point and climbed back into the transport. The moment everyone was aboard, the pilot launched, pulling away from the fortress at maximum speed. Through the viewport, Danny saw the asteroid base crumbling under continued bombardment. Fires burned across its surface and sections were breaking apart. "You're safe now," Ryan said, putting a hand on Danny's shoulder. "We're taking you home." Danny felt tears running down his face. He was too exhausted and overwhelmed to be embarrassed about it. "Thank you. Thank you for coming." "Of course we came," Ryan replied with a tired smile. "We don't leave our people behind, ever." The transport docked with the Valiant 10 minutes later. Medical teams were waiting to check Danny over. Admiral Paul Grant was there too, wanting to see with his own eyes that the young engineer was safe. Paul looked at Danny, this ordinary young man who'd triggered the largest military operation in human history. "Welcome back, son. Let's get you home." Danny nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He was going home. He was actually going home. The journey back to Earth took 12 days. Danny spent most of that time in the medical bay of the ECS Valiant, recovering from dehydration, malnutrition, and the psychological trauma of his captivity. The doctors fussed over him constantly, running tests and making sure he was eating properly. He gained back some of the weight he'd lost, and the color returned to his face. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes visited him on the third day. She brought him real coffee, the good stuff from Earth, and sat with him while he drank it. Danny savored every sip like it was the most precious thing in the universe. "I wanted to thank you," Lisa said. "Your rescue gave all of us a purpose. I've never seen the fleet work together like that before." Danny shook his head. "I should be thanking you. All of you. I still can't believe you came. An entire fleet for one person. That's what makes us human." Lisa replied simply, "We don't calculate the cost when one of our own is in danger. We just act." News of Danny's rescue reached Earth before the fleet did. The entire planet celebrated. People poured into the streets waving flags and cheering. Amy Carter stood in her apartment in Boston, watching the news reports and crying tears of joy. Her brother was alive. He was coming home, but not everyone in the galaxy was celebrating. The Creathian government was in chaos. Their military leadership had been decimated, their territorial defenses were in ruins, and their reputation as fearsome raiders was destroyed. The human fleet had cut through them like they were nothing, all for the sake of one hostage. Diplomatic channels across the galaxy buzzed with activity. Representatives from dozens of species contacted Earth, some to express congratulations, others to voice concerns. The human response had been unprecedented and had sent shockwaves through the established order. The Viridian ambassador, a tall being with silver skin and 3 eyes, met with the United Earth Council via hologram. "Your actions were extreme," the ambassador said carefully. "We understand wanting to protect your citizens, but the scale of your response was surprising." Helen Brooks, speaking for the council, didn't back down. "Our response was proportional to the crime. The Crithians took one of our civilians. We made it clear that such actions have consequences. We hope this message reaches everyone who might consider testing humanity's resolve." The ambassador's 3 eyes blinked slowly. "The message has been received. I assure you of that." Other species had similar conversations with Earth. Some were more supportive, others more critical, but all of them acknowledged the same truth. Humanity had announced itself as a power that operated by different rules. They valued individual lives in a way that seemed almost irrational to species that thought in terms of populations and resources. Admiral Paul Grant prepared his report for the Council during the flight home. The numbers were sobering. 23 ships damaged, though none destroyed. 47 casualties, mostly from boarding actions. The financial cost was in the billions, but they'd achieved their objective. Danny Carter was safe, and the Crithians would never threaten a human again. When Paul finished his report, Karen West, his second-in-command, reviewed it and frowned. "The Council is going to ask if it was worth it." "It was worth it," Paul said without hesitation. "Every credit spent, every life lost, it was worth it to prove that we mean what we say. No human gets left behind." The fleet entered Earth's solar system on a sunny Tuesday morning, ships spread out across orbital positions, their hulls scarred from battle but their crews proud. The ECS Valiant took up position in high orbit, and Danny was transferred to a shuttle for the final journey to the surface. He rode down with Captain Ryan Mitchell and several of the Marines who'd rescued him. They'd become friends during the journey home, sharing stories and jokes. Ryan told Danny about his family in California, and Danny talked about his sister Amy and his plans for the future. The shuttle landed at a military base in Colorado. When the hatch opened, Danny saw thousands of people waiting. There were military personnel in dress uniforms, government officials in suits, and media cameras everywhere. But his eyes found only one person in the crowd. Amy broke through the security line and ran toward him. Danny met her halfway, and they collided in a fierce hug. Both of them were crying, holding on to each other like they'd never let go. "I knew they'd come for you," Amy sobbed into his shoulder. "I knew it." "They did," Danny whispered back. "They really did." The reunion was broadcast live across Earth and throughout human space. Billions of people watched the Carter siblings embrace, and many of them cried along with the 2 young people on the screen. It was a moment of pure emotion, of relief and joy and gratitude. Admiral Paul Grant attended the ceremony later that day, where medals were awarded to the Marines and crew members who'd participated in the rescue operation. Captain Ryan Mitchell received the Star of Valor, the highest military honor Earth could give. He accepted it with quiet dignity, then gave a short speech. "We did what any human would do," Ryan said simply. "We went after one of our own. That's who we are. That's who we'll always be." The ceremony ended with a moment of silence for the 47 who'd died in the operation. Their names were read aloud and each one was honored. Danny stood with his head bowed, feeling the weight of what these people had sacrificed for him. He would carry that weight for the rest of his life. In the weeks that followed, Danny struggled to adjust to his newfound fame. Everyone wanted to interview him, to hear his story, to ask him questions. He did a few interviews, mostly to thank the people who'd saved him and to honor those who'd died. But mostly he wanted to return to a normal life. That proved impossible. Danny Carter had become a symbol of humanity's values, and symbols don't get to be ordinary. He eventually decided to use his platform for something positive. He became an advocate for civilian safety in space, pushing for stronger protections and better security at trading posts and stations. Lisa Hayes was promoted to commander and given command of her own ship. She continued to serve with distinction, but she often thought about the Danny Carter operation and what it had meant. It had been the defining moment of her career, proof that sometimes the right thing to do wasn't the logical thing but the human thing. Admiral Paul Grant retired 6 months after the operation. He'd spent his entire life in service to Earth, and he felt like he'd accomplished something truly important in his final mission. At his retirement ceremony, he gave one last speech. "We sent a message to the galaxy," Paul said to the assembled crowd. "We told them that humanity values every single life. We told them that we'll cross any distance, pay any price, and fight any battle to bring our people home." That message wasn't just for aliens. It was for every human who lives and works in space. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. We will always come for you. The speech was met with a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. On the first anniversary of his rescue, Danny visited the memorial that had been erected for the 47 who died. It was a beautiful structure made of white stone, with all the names carved into it. At the top was an inscription that read, "They gave their lives so one could return home. Greater love has no one than this." Danny placed flowers at the base of the memorial and stood in silence for a long time. Amy was there with him, along with Ryan Mitchell and several of the other Marines who'd rescued him. None of them spoke. Some things didn't need words. The galaxy had learned its lesson. In the year following the Carter operation, incidents of humans being targeted by pirates or raiders dropped to nearly zero. Other species now understood that humans were different, that they operated by principles that didn't always make sense economically or logically, but were absolute and unshakable. The Crithians never recovered their former power. Their government collapsed within months, and their territory was absorbed by other species. Some saw it as justice, others as a tragedy, but everyone agreed on one thing. They'd made a fatal mistake when they took Danny Carter hostage. Danny eventually returned to space, working as an engineer on a new station that had state-of-the-art security systems. He wasn't afraid. He knew that wherever he went, whatever happened, Earth would always be watching. Earth would always care. Earth would always come. That was the promise humanity had made, written in fire and blood across the stars. It was a promise they would keep, not just for Danny Carter, but for every human who ventured into the vast darkness of space. They would never be alone. They would never be forgotten. And they would never, ever be left behind. The story of Danny Carter became a legend told across the galaxy. It was taught in alien schools as an example of human psychology, discussed in diplomatic circles as a case study in interspecies relations, and remembered by humans as a defining moment in their history. And every time a human ship passed through alien space, every time a human walked through a trading post or docked at a foreign station, the other species watched them with new respect and understanding. These weren't just random individuals. These were members of a civilization that would move heaven and earth for any one of them. That made every human valuable. That made every human dangerous to threaten. Danny Carter had been one ordinary engineer in the wrong place at the wrong time. But his rescue had proven something extraordinary about the